Now, let's take a look at congregational music, not from the perspective of the gospel song, which was an American innovation, but from the perspective of contemporary Christian music, which is a different branch. CCM, contemporary Christian music, began in the 1970s being known as Jesus music. But before that, it had its foundation just a little bit before that. Back to the 1940s, there was an organization called Youth for Christ, which still exists, founded by Bill Bright. And Billy Graham was probably the best known evangelist for Youth for Christ. And they would do evangelistic outreaches, these great crusades. They had a theme song called Christ for Me. This was the sound of Youth for Christ in the 1940s and 1950s. And what they decided to do was to take young people such as Pat Boone and folk groups and turn them into Christian celebrities, so that people from a community would hear there's going to be this concert and there's also going to be preaching, and they would come, and there they would hear music that sounded like their music, early rock and roll, folk music, and they would relate to that, they would like it, they'd be drawn to that, and then they would hear the gospel preached and they would come to Christ. Of course, what happened was, within about a decade, those young people became adults and started going to church, and that music that was used to reach out to them, it sounded like spiritual music to them. And so there was quite a controversy in Youth for Christ as the next generation of outreach in the 1960s said, what we need to do is have more of an edge and be more rock and roll in our outreach efforts. And so, as it always is, one generation, uses the same principles as the previous one, but somehow it doesn't feel the same to the new generation. And so Ralph Carmichael became the music director. And in the 1960s, 1970s, he was writing songs like He's Everything to Me. I looked for love. And the song called Love is Surrender, which was done in two different versions. There was his version for church. Without God, love is not to be found. And then there was a version that a group called the Carpenters made really famous. And so it was a crossover song in the true sense of the word. He wrote musicals like Tell It Like It Is and Natural High. Believe it or not, he wrote a musical called Natural High. In later life, Ralph Carmichael put together a tour that he called the Young Messiah Tour, in which he was introducing the music of Handel to the younger generation by setting it in a more contemporary way. Well, anyway, those are important songs for us to know in order to understand the foundation of Jesus music. Peter Schulte was a Roman Catholic who wrote a folk mass, and in that folk mass in 1966 was this one song called We Are One in the Spirit. They'll know we are Christians by our love. And it became a huge hit in the 1970s among youth groups. Now, had we known that a Roman Catholic had written it, we probably would not have been allowed to sing it, but how ironic that we were singing how we were one in the Spirit, even as we theologically didn't agree that we were one in the Spirit. Kurt Kaiser, who wrote together with Ralph Carmichael some of those musicals, he wrote the song Pass It On, which very popular in the early 1970s. And decade later.
How he loves you and me. Oh, how he loves you and me. He gave his life, what more could he give? Oh, how he loves you. Oh, how he loves me. Oh, how he loves you and me.
Karen Lafferty wrote the song Seek Ye First.
Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Alleluia, alleluia.
Jack Hayford wrote the song Majesty.
Worship his majesty.
Jack Hayford, who is known as a preacher, has been for 40 years now, began as a musician and songwriter.
Majesty, kingdom authority, flows from his throne unto his own, his anthem reigns.
Dottie Rambo wrote We Shall Behold Him, along with several other songs. Michael W. Smith didn't write a lot of worship songs, but anything he wrote was successful and well done. And his songs Great Is the Lord and Agnus Dei have been used many times over the years. Twyla Paris, I believe, is one of the strongest songwriters of the 1980s, and congregationally she wrote We Will Glorify and He Is Exalted.
I will praise him, he is exalted, forever exalted, and I will praise his name.
Don Moen pretty much owned the 1980s and 1990s as a worship leader and as a songwriter, and he wrote such songs as God Will Make a Way.
God will make a way where there seems to be no way.
I Am the God That Healeth Thee.
I am the God that healeth thee. I am the Lord your healer.
Blessed Be the Name of the Lord, and Mighty Is Our God. Well, since the year 2000, you pretty much know what has happened because you've lived in that world. But I wanted to catch you up to the 20th century and what happened during the course of that century, and make sure that you knew some really important songs of those generations. And so I guess we conclude at this point our historical sweep of congregational singing from the beginning of the church up until the beginning of the 20th century. 2,000 years of congregational singing. Many different styles, a lot of different writers and words, but all one theme, and that is the Lord Jesus Christ. May God bless you as you lead others in song.